He was just 8 years old, an orange candy bag in his hand, a plastic pumpkin whistle around his neck. 1 second, he was laughing on a quiet street in Boulder, Colorado, running door to door in his skeleton costume. The next, he was gone. No scream, no trace, just a porch light flickering and a half-empty sidewalk. For 15 years, his family searched, clung to memories, and lived with questions no one could answer. Until one Halloween night, the doorbell rang. And there it was, his old orange candy bag, returned full. This is the story of a boy who vanished on a night meant for joy, of a family that refused to let silence be the ending, and of a single bag of candy that carried the truth back to their doorstep. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? I read every single comment, and I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Boulder, Colorado, Halloween night, October 31st, 2009. The Flatirons were a black saw edge against a high moon. Leaves skittered, porch bulbs glowed, and somewhere a tinny radio played Monster Mash. Karen Miller tightened the last knot on her son's costume hood. Nate, hold still. The little skeleton obeyed. The orange cotton candy bag, hand-stitched pumpkin face drawn in marker, hung from his wrist. A plastic pumpkin whistle dangled from the drawstring. If he got turned around, 2 blasts, and wait. Thomas tapped the porch light that always flickered in wind. "Corner by the maple. No shortcuts," he said again. Amanda, 12, echoed it with her brother. On the curb, Kevin Harper bounced in a stormtrooper suit. They set off along 9th Street through the smell of damp leaves and roasted seeds. Dog nails clicked. A porch step groaned. The bag thudded Nathan's thigh with each hop, weight building with every trick or treat. He traded Smarties for a peanut butter cup because Amanda hated them, and he liked the way she smiled when he remembered. House after house, light after light. At Mrs. Alvarez's place, the bowl sat beneath a note, "Take 1, already rated." At the Hessers, a man in a cape snapped a photo and handed out glow sticks. Nathan tucked his carefully into the bag so it won't crack. He kept touching the whistle like a promise. The wind sharpened. A sensor light down the block flicked on, off. Amanda told Kevin a rumor, full-size bars on University if you knocked after 9, and he begged for one last push. Thomas allowed it, the corner with the maple. The tree, their landmark, rattled coins of leaves. Nathan trotted ahead, whistle tapping his wrist, sneakers skidding on roots that pushed the sidewalk. He planted his feet at the corner and waited, breath fogging. Thomas lifted a hand to wave. A delivery truck ground a low gear. 2 teens ran past, laughing through plastic vampire teeth. The porch light above Nathan's head stuttered back strong. When Amanda looked up from tying Kevin's shoe, he was still there, narrow shoulders straight beneath black fabric. And then, between one heartbeat and the next, he wasn't. They reached the corner in a rush of apologies. Thomas circled the maple. Karen called the name that shrinks a street to a hard point, "Nathan." Doors opened. The whistle never blew. Police lights washed the block. The orange bag didn't turn up in hedges or drains. A thread pulled. The night unraveled. 13 years later, October 31st, 2022. The house on 9th kept its rituals, a candle in the window, the porch light on till 9, a bowl with Amanda's neat note, "Take 1, please." The air had the same bite. Somewhere, a too cheerful song from a Bluetooth speaker 2 doors down. At 8:13 p.m., the doorbell chimed once. Amanda opened to an empty porch. No footsteps on the walk. No engine fading, only the hum of the bulb that still blinked in wind. On the mat sat the orange candy bag, rounded, heavy. The drawstring cinched in Karen's old square knot, the marker pumpkin more faded, the crooked smile still there. Amanda crouched. The cotton was cold. Lifting by the strap, she felt weight shift, something small tapping from inside. She closed the door with her heel. Karen froze in the hall. Thomas's chair scraped in the kitchen. Amanda loosed the knot. The drawstring rasped. Something hard knocked again, like asking permission. Her fingers found the first object by memory, alone, a cheap plastic pumpkin whistle. She pressed her thumb over the stitch Karen always doubled at the corner, one uneven X that only family would notice. A smell rose when the fabric warmed in her hand, sugar and paper. Yes, but also something older, cedar shavings, a breath of motor oil, the ghost of a garage she hadn't stood in since she was 12. Beneath the whistle lay candy in their bright, crinkled skins, brands she recognized from 2009, and newer ones, as if time itself had been scooped and poured. At the very bottom her fingertips brushed cardboard. A trading card? No, a photo trimmed tight, edges soft with handling. She stopped herself. Air thinned. Karen gripped the doorway. Thomas reached for the old whistle like it might finish a sentence 13 years long. The weight settled in her lap. 13. Halloweens of silence had never felt this loud. The whistle is back. The bag is full. And a hidden photo waits inside. Amanda Miller did not choose to become the archivist of her own family, but the work fit her hands the way the old orange bag once fit her brother's wrist. At 30, in the fall of 2022, she taught American literature at Boulder High, graded essays about unreliable narrators, and biked to school on a creaking cruiser with a milk crate bungee corded to the rack. Every drawer in her small bedroom carried a different chapter of the same story: police flyers, timeline notebooks, a laminated map of their neighborhood marked with colored pins, and a shoebox of Halloween snapshots whose edges had gone soft from years of being thumbed and rethumbed. Her students liked her because she listened. She remembered which kid's mother worked nights, who had a stutter when tired, who could not read poetry without tapping a pencil to keep rhythm. She remembered, too, that she had once been 12, standing at a corner by a maple, with a knot in her throat so tight she could not swallow her brother's name. In her class, she taught point of view as a kind of compass, a way to keep your bearings when the world tilts. Out of class, she used that same discipline to survive a different narrative, one in which the author refused to finish the chapter. Amanda was not extraordinary. That was the point. She was careful. She kept duplicates of records. She learned the public records request process because no adult should have to memorize the difference between incident and supplemental reports. But she did. She learned to scan photographs, correct dust and crease, and catalog each file by date. She did not call this obsession. She called it housekeeping. If you leave the story lying around, someone will trip over it in the dark. Her relationship with her parents carried the polite, aching choreography of people who loved one another inside a house that remembered everything. Karen ran a small alterations business from the dining room now, the old sewing machine whirring under the same light fixture that had flickered the night he disappeared. Thomas taught shop at a community college and kept a collection of rescued radios in the garage. You could hear them sometimes, low AM voices, a baseball game 4 states away, a hymn like the house itself was trying to pick up a signal from the past. Amanda handled the practical things, oil changes, tax folders, refilling the salt for the winter walks. She handled the anniversaries, too, by not naming them out loud. She had stayed close to Kevin Harper in the only way that made sense. They could sit side by side and not say Nathan's name for an hour, then say it once and not look at each other for another hour. Kevin worked maintenance for the district now. He always carried a small headlamp, even in daylight, a habit that started the winter after 2009, when crowds of volunteers combed creek paths and culverts, and he learned to keep both hands free. He was the last kid to see Nathan that night. People still asked him what he saw. He still answered the same way: a skeleton at the corner, a porch light stuttering back strong, and then a blank space where a boy had been. Amanda's dreams had narrowed into modest geometry. She wanted a reliable car, a second-hand dog, a quiet February, a life that did not ask her to perform grief in public. Once, briefly, there was a man named Eli who cooked omelets with avocado and left her refrigerator notes like tickets to a better movie. He left when he realized the house was a co-author and he could not compete. Amanda did not blame him. She had learned not to hold what would not be held. The orange bag's return on Halloween 2022 did not blow her life open. It clicked it into place, like a well-cut gear finding its seat after turning in air too long. She recognized her mother's knot, her own childhood fingerprints ghosted in the marker lines when the fabric warmed. She felt, in the cheap plastic whistle, a small instrument that once promised a map back to each other. Back then, they had rehearsed. 2 blasts and wait. She had waited 13 years. She did not open the photo at the bottom right away. That was important. Amanda believed in pace. She poured the candy onto the table first, making a tidy harvest of wrappers, then and now, so she could prove to herself that she was still the adult in the room. Thomas washed his hands and dried them twice. Karen brought the sewing scissors and set them on the table like a relic. Outside, voices rose and fell. A little kid praised for saying please. Inside, the whistle lay between them like punctuation, a pause, a held breath. People sometimes asked Amanda what kind of teacher she wanted to be. She answered honestly, the kind who teaches kids how to hold a question without rushing to hurt themselves with the first answer. That was the only training that had prepared her for her real vocation. Daughter, sister, witness. She knew how to inventory fear without letting it inventory her. On her desk at home, 3 objects never moved. A Polaroid of 2 kids on a curb, Amanda with crooked bangs, Nathan with a gap-toothed grin, a library copy of Joan Didion's essays with too many fluorescent flags, and a spiral notebook labeled with a year she would not say out loud. The notebook kept a ledger of small specifics, what color jacket she wore the day the search dogs came, which neighbor had changed porch bulbs that week, the exact time a streetlight on 9th was replaced, because once a detective had said a bulb might matter and the sentence had never left her. If someone told her memory was a room, she could have drawn you the floor plan. She could have told you which board creaked when you crossed to the window. She was not fearless. She carried a private list of places she avoided, the alley by the hardware store, the footbridge over Boulder Creek, where flyers once fluttered on the rail, the thrift shop where, one spring, a boy had run past in a skeleton costume for a themed party, and she had sat on the floor between winter coats and sobbed into her scarf. But she went to the post office every week. She bought stamps. She mailed letters to county clerks she had learned first-name cordiality with. She learned passwords and portals and how to wait on hold without losing her temper. She learned that grown people could be kind and that systems could be cruel by accident, and that both were true at once. Amanda remembered Nathan not as a mystery, but as a person. He pronounced spaghetti biscotti for too long because nobody corrected him on purpose. He lined up toy cars by color, not size. He once cried because he stepped on a ladybug and then drew at a grave with a crayon cross. He wore the pumpkin whistle like a medal and took 2 practice breaths before every block the night he vanished because rules felt like rope bridges to him and he crossed them carefully. She kept these details on purpose. You cannot look for a ghost. You can only look for a boy. Her strength was administrative tenderness. She would remember your birthday and the number on your case file. She could quote a paragraph of policy and then hand you a sweater because the interrogation room AC was too cold. When she volunteered with the local missing persons nonprofit, she did intake forms with a voice you could lean on. She told families the thing nobody tells you: it is okay to make dinner and laugh at a sitcom and still love the one who is gone. It is okay to buy stamps. It is okay to sleep. In the fall of 2022, before the bag came home, Amanda had almost allowed herself a future that included a dog. She bookmarked the shelter page for a graying mutt named Minerva, who slept like an old professor and needed stairs to get on the couch. After the bag came, she left the tab open, but stopped refreshing. Her mother began hemming pants for college kids and talked more while she worked. Her father, who never cried in front of Amanda after 2010, started leaving a glass of water for himself by the radio, as if even he believed the house might start speaking again, and he wanted to be ready to listen. Nothing about the orange bag felt supernatural to Amanda. It felt human. Handled, carried, set down, lifted again. She examined the strap for fray patterns, the base for dust, the interior for scents she could name: cedar, motor oil, a ghost of mint. She wrote them in the notebook. She drew the bag at actual size and noted the seam where Karen had doubled the stitch. She wrote down the weight, then added, in a smaller hand, how it felt, like someone had brought a chapter back with pages missing on purpose. Only then did she pick up the photo. She turned it over. No date, no handwriting. On the front, a boy in a skeleton costume sat cross-legged on a concrete floor next to a pegboard of tools. The angle was slightly above, as if the photographer were standing over him. A pumpkin whistle string cut a diagonal across the chest bone of the costume. The boy's left hand held a paper cup. His right touched the orange bag as if to steady it. Behind him, a shadow fell across a red metal toolbox. It looked like a shoulder, or a coat, or nothing. Amanda did not zoom to conclusions. She wrote, garage, pegboard, red toolbox, fluorescent light hum. Then she listened. The house gave her the same answer it had for 13 years, a breath, then a silence. Amanda slid the photo into an acid-free sleeve and into a folder with a calm she had learned one hard inch at a time. She was the kind of person who could love a brother and a question without destroying herself on either. Later, when she would go to the garage to check the smell of cedar against an old crate Thomas kept near the radios, she would think of something small and practical that Nathan had said when he was 6, after he learned to tie shoes. 2 loops, cross, pull. Do it slow, and it stays. She did it slow. She made it stay. Amanda Miller had a talent that would matter soon. She knew how to hold a mystery without letting it hold her hostage. Which is why when the doorbell rang a second time that night, only one chime, the same as before, she did not jump. She stood, she breathed once, and she went to the door with the whistle in her pocket. The whistle did not leave Amanda's pocket. She touched it sometimes the way one checks for keys, grounding herself in plastic ridges worn smooth by a boy's teeth. It was November now, days after Halloween 2022, and boulders slid into early dark. Wind smelled of snow from the high peaks. Porch pumpkins sagged inward. Candy wrappers flattened on sidewalks, and still the bag sat on the dining room table, under a towel, as if covering it could keep the questions from multiplying. The police came first. Not the same faces. Detective Charles Donovan had retired a decade earlier, but a young officer who tried to balance sympathy with protocol. He wore gloves, logged each candy piece in clear bags, photographed the whistle, the seam, the knot. Could be a prank, he said. Amanda wrote the phrase down in her spiral, underlined twice. Karen flinched at the word prank. She had hemmed costumes for neighbors' kids, stitched capes and princess hems, but the return of her son's bag was not a joke. Thomas leaned on the table with knuckles whitening. Pranks don't remember how my wife ties knots. The bag carried more than candy. At the bottom, tucked with the photograph, was a folded receipt. Amanda noticed it only after the police left. Thin paper, corners softened, a gas station slip, printed faint. The date, October 31st, 2022. Time, 7:42 p.m. Location, a station 5 miles east, out by the highway. Amanda circled the time. That was before the doorbell rang. Someone had handled the bag that very evening. She shared it with her parents at breakfast. Karen covered her mouth, not with shock, but with a tailor's reflex, like measuring how fabric drapes. Thomas swore softly, turned the slip in his hand. Somebody bought fuel, paid cash. Amanda noted the pump number, the clerk ID. Later she drove out there, the whistle in her pocket like a talisman. The station smelled of burnt coffee and antifreeze. The clerk, late 20s, tired eyes, looked at the receipt. Shift was mine. Halloween's busy. I don't remember a bag. He shrugged, but his voice cracked on remember. Amanda wrote that down too. Back home she opened her files. One drawer held witness statements from 2009. One page she had memorized, Kevin Harper describing the corner, the porch light, the skeleton still and then gone. She placed the gas receipt on that page as if the years could talk to each other. That night she dreamed of the maple rattling coins, a porch light stuttering, and a boy's whistle calling from somewhere she could not reach. The following week strange things accumulated. Candy wrappers began appearing on their porch, different brands, neatly folded, placed side by side like offerings. Amanda logged dates and brands, Almond Joy, Tootsie Roll, a newer energy bar sample, once a wrapped caramel that had melted into its own paper. Karen wanted to sweep them away. Amanda refused. Their messages. She photographed each, bagged them in labeled envelopes. Neighbors noticed. A woman across the street asked if someone had moved back into the Miller house. Lights are on later now, she said. Amanda hadn't realized she had taken to working until midnight at the table. Papers spread, lamp glowing against the dark. Rumors flickered, kids whispering about ghosts, parents warning about pranksters. Amanda collected each rumor like she collected wrappers. Not evidence, not yet, but signs. Signs that pointed somewhere, even if the compass spun. One evening, Kevin stopped by. He saw the envelopes, the towel covering the bag. "This is starting again," he said flatly. Amanda pushed a photograph toward him, the skeleton boy on concrete, whistle string diagonal across his chest. Kevin stared. His throat worked. "That's him," he whispered, though the costume was generic, the shadow ambiguous. "That's him, the night I—" He broke off. He had never finished that sentence in 13 years. Amanda underlined his words anyway. "That's him." The second doorbell had rung the night the bag returned, a single chime that felt like a cleared throat. Nothing had been left then, or so Amanda believed, until she noticed a pale scrape on the brass of the knob, a thumbnail's arc, and a smear the color of pencil lead just under the peephole, graphite. Someone had steadied a hand there. She swabbed it with tape and folded the tape into wax paper, labeling the envelope in her tidy block letters. No assumptions, only observations. Thomas's radios began to misbehave. At 8:13 p.m., the time stamped in Amanda's notes for the first chime, one of the old AM sets in the garage clicked from static to a thin human shape of sound. Traffic conditions, the seventh inning of some forgotten game, the tale of a weather report. Then it went quiet again. Thomas joked that the garage had opinions. Amanda mapped the interruption times and saw what her father had felt. A pattern. Someone in the neighborhood flipped something on and off at nearly the same minute each night. She went back to the gas station with copies of the receipt and a letter on school letterhead requesting preservation of footage. The manager, a woman with silver hair and the kind of smile that means, "I have seen worse," let her in the cramped back office. 14-day retention, the woman said, shaking her head. "You're inside the window. Let's look." They scrubbed through a timeline of Halloween, a parade of witches and construction vans and parents in fleece. At 7:41 p.m., a pickup rolled in, dark green, with a camper shell. The driver wore a canvas jacket and work gloves. In the bed, cedar planks strapped with twine, a red metal toolbox shoved against the tailgate. At 7:42, the driver went inside. At 7:44, he came out with a small paper bag and a coffee, set the coffee on the toolbox, and looked toward the passenger seat as if talking to someone, or something, inside. The orange of a fabric corner flashed once in the dash light. Then the truck pulled out toward town. Amanda breathed through her nose, slow. Details, not leaps. She wrote, "Green pickup, camper shell, red toolbox, cedar planks, gloves." The manager paused the video again. "See that?" she said, tapping the screen where the driver's elbow clipped daylight. On the jacket sleeve, a stitched oval patch flashed. Front range HVAC. The manager looked at Amanda, then at the wall where a dead clock had frozen at 11:11 years ago. "My brother does HVAC," she said softly. "Those patches itch like crazy." On her way home, Amanda took Arapahoe back and noticed, without deciding to, how many service trucks shared that blue oval patch. She counted 6 before the light at 55th. Common, not unique, still a direction. The wrappers on their porch changed. Instead of random brands, they started to repeat the same peanut butter cup every other night, folded the same way, like a signature. On Friday, a wrapper showed up cut into a thin strip and tied around a single maple leaf stem left on the mat. Karen stepped on it and started to cry, not from fear, Amanda could tell, but from the tenderness of the knot. The knot was her knot. Amanda photographed the leaf and slid it into a book to dry. Kevin suggested a camera. Amanda agreed, but not the kind you buy online and announce to the block with stickers. She borrowed a small wildlife cam from a science teacher at school, the kind that watched foxes and raccoons, and set it low in the planter box with the lens behind the spiky berth of a yucca. She calibrated it with her own footsteps, counted paces from the sidewalk. She wrote the angles down. She set an alarm for 8:01 p.m. and waited in the dark behind the front room curtain, the whistle cool in her pocket. Nothing happened at 8:13. At 8:17, a bicycle passed. At 8:21, a pair of joggers. At 8:26, the doorbell chimed once. Closer to 20 past than 13, Amanda noted. She waited 3 breaths, then pulled the door open smooth. The porch was empty, but the mat had caught a corner, a small metal tag the size of a postage stamp, dull and stamped with 3 characters, C17. It was threaded to a single key by a brittle rubber ring. Amanda did not touch the key with bare fingers. She slid it into a sandwich bag and wrote what it was not. Not a house key, not a car fob, not a padlock with brand. It looked like a storage unit key, or a locker, or a maintenance closet. In her notebook, she wrote the ways the world offers you letters and numbers, church mailboxes, school keys, gym lockers, storage rows. Thomas, reading upside down, said, "Could be the shop cages at the college, the ones for Project Lumber." Karen said nothing. Amanda understood the silence. A mother knows when the world is moving and where and when to hold her breath. The wildlife cam caught a shape. At school the next morning, she plugged the SD card into a classroom laptop and braced for a fox. The frames were grainy but patient. At 8:25, the sidewalk showed empty. At 8:26:12, the top left corner held motion. An elbow, maybe, in a canvas jacket. At 8:26:14, a hand entered the frame with the care of someone setting down a teacup in a sleeping house. The angle hid the face. The wrist bore a thin white line, a healed scar along the ulna pale as chalk, and a woven bracelet the color of lake water. The hand placed the tag and key and lifted away, fingers long, nails clean. Amanda took stills. She adjusted contrast until the pixels scattered into tiny squares and then backed off until they recomposed into a hand. She called Kevin. He came during his lunch with his headlamp in his pocket like a reflex. He looked and nodded once. "Lefty," he said. "He's left-handed." Amanda's heart moved in a way that felt like a door unlocking. She had taught essays about evidence. Now evidence was teaching her how to breathe. She brought the stills to the police. The young officer pursed his mouth. Could be a prankster, he said again, but he scanned the key and logged it. We can dust the tag. Amanda asked about HVAC companies with green pickups. Half the town, he said, but he did not say it unkindly. He promised to canvass storage facilities. She promised herself not to count on promises. That night the porch light stuttered once, hard and steadied. Kevin sat on the steps with Amanda, both of them in coats, both of them careful not to make the moment larger than it was. "You remember when we were kids," he said, voice low, "and Nate would practice with the whistle, 2 blasts, then wait? He was so scared of getting it wrong, he made us practice in the backyard until my mom yelled." Amanda smiled without moving her mouth. "I remember." The radio in the garage clicked again at 8:26 and grabbed a voice out of the air. "C-17, copy that." It was a coincidence, dispatch chatter from somewhere else, a different C-17 than the tag in the bag on the table. But coincidence is a word people use when two facts are uncomfortable neighbors. Amanda wrote it down anyway. She began to see cedar everywhere. It lined a planter at the coffee shop. It stacked in a neighbor's yard. It leaned in bundles near the maintenance shed at school. She lifted a plank in the shed with permission and smelled it. Sharp, clean, exact. That scent lived in the orange bag. She checked the shop cages at the community college where Thomas taught. Their tags ran A1 through A12. No C-17. She photographed them anyway. On Sunday, a chalk skeleton appeared on the sidewalk at the corner where Nathan had waited. Not a childish scrawl. It was neat, bones proportioned, finger bones counting to 5 on the left hand and 4 on the right, as if the chalk had snapped before finishing. Amanda touched the chalk, felt the powder, fresh. She followed a faint line to the base of the maple. In the mulch lay a wrapper folded into a square, the same peanut butter cup brand, the same crease pattern. She could have picked it out of a lineup. She did something small and radical then. She blew the whistle, 2 short bursts, and waited. Nothing happened. A dog barked. Leaves changed their mind about falling. Somewhere a gate clanged. Amanda put the whistle back in her pocket and did the thing that had kept her alive. She walked home. She scanned the street. She saw nothing that was not there. At 9:03 p.m., when she locked the door, she heard a soft metal sound on the porch, like a key brushing wood. She opened fast and caught only the smell of mint on the air, faint and ordinary as a stick of gum. On the mat lay a business card, no name, just a logo of a storage facility 3 miles east, and a row number written in pencil, C. The second line was blank, as if someone had run out of time. Amanda turned the card over and found one more pencil mark, a tiny diagonal line at the bottom right corner, like the beginning of a 7. She brought the card inside. She placed it next to the key. She did not say the number out loud. She wrote it. She circled it. C-17. Amanda did not rush the key. She made coffee instead and watched the steam lift until it disappeared. Then she called the police, because that is what you do when a key with a tag appears on your porch the same week your missing brother's Halloween bag comes home. The young officer from before took her statement again, eyes sliding to the envelopes on the table, each neatly labeled with a candy brand and date. "We'll contact the storage facility," he said. His tone sat somewhere between professional and apologetic. Openings require management present, and often a warrant. Amanda nodded. The word warrant belonged to the world she had learned to walk in with careful feet. She breathed, wrote the time of the call, and underlined a sentence for herself. Do it slow, and it stays. At lunch she drove to the storage facility anyway, east of town by the frontage road, a low grid of orange doors set in pale concrete. The logo on the sign matched the card from the porch, a friendly cartoon padlock that seemed to be winking at her. The office smelled of sugared coffee and dry cardboard. A woman in her 50s with a braid past her shoulder looked up from a ledger. Her name tag said Marta. She listened without interruptions, the way small business owners do when the story might involve liability. When Amanda laid the card and the bagged key on the counter, Marta's mouth made the shape of O. "We can't open a unit without the renter or law enforcement," Marta said carefully. "But I can tell you if a unit C-17 exists." She tapped keys, frowned. "C row is the Far East block. C-17, yeah." She hesitated, eyes moving in a small circle as if reading something on her screen that cost her a private wince. "Renter's name is a P.O. box, payments in cash, always just before late fees. Been that way 3 years. Before that?" She scrolled. "Different name. Same P.O. box." "Do you have cameras?" Amanda asked. There was no edge in her voice. Curiosity had trained her to sound like hospitality. "Drive-in gate and the office," Marta said. "You'll want a subpoena for footage longer than a day or two, but if you lost something in the parking lot today—" She let the sentence trail off. "Good people sometimes leave you doors." Amanda did not go hunting for loopholes. She left a copy of the police card. She left her number. She thanked Marta and drove the rows slow, reading the letters A, B, C, painted at the edges of the blocks. Row C sat under a wire fence where prairie grass pushed through gravel in stubborn blades. Unit 17 wore a nickel-sized rust bloom at the bottom right corner. The light above the row buzzed. She did not try the key. She would not contaminate anything. She trained her phone at her feet and took a photograph of gravel so later she could count her steps back to the exact place she had not crossed. Back home, she found Thomas in the garage, the smallest radio murmuring a station that did not exist, and then falling quiet. "You went to look," he said without turning. It wasn't accusation. Fact. "If the police open it," he added, "we go too." "We ask to," Amanda said. They stood among the scents that had crept into her notes. Cedar shavings from the crate against the wall, a thread of motor oil, something mint she could not place. She filed a memory fragment. When Nathan got carsick once, Thomas had given him a mint and told him to breathe through his nose. Nathan had obliged like it was a rule. That night the porch camera took only moths and a raccoon with the self-importance of a union boss. No key, no wrappers. Amanda slept with the whistle on her nightstand, surprised to wake with it still there, surprised that her hand had not found it at 3 a.m., the way it used to in dreams. 2 days later, the officer called. "We can meet management tomorrow morning," he said. "If you'd like to be there, you can observe." He paused, as if to soften expectations with manners. "We don't know what we'll find. Often it's nothing." "Nothing still tells a story," Amanda said. She thanked him for the courtesy and then called Kevin, because waiting is an art, and a witness is a frame. They arrived at 9:12 a.m. under a sky bleached by wind. Marta met them with a clipboard. The young officer stood beside her with a second officer who carried a small tool roll. The unit door wore a boxed disc lock and a thin line of dust on the bottom seam. Amanda read the dust like tea leaves, no recent lifts. The officer photographed the lock from 3 angles before he snapped the shackle. The sound was smaller than movies make it. Metal surrendered with an embarrassed cough. The door rolled up with the rubber-lipped sigh of something that had not moved in a while. The smell hit first, cedar and motor oil. Amanda's knees went weak, not with fear, with recognition. The unit was not crowded. Order lived here. On the left, bundles of cedar planks stacked like books tied with twine. On the right, a red metal toolbox, the exact scarlet of the box in the photo, sat on a low rolling cart. A cheap folding table held a lined notebook, a roll of blue painter's tape, and a pair of work gloves. Above it, a pegboard with hooks traced the negative shapes of tools that were not there, as if someone had packed and left in a thoughtful hurry. The officer lifted a palm. "We'll look first," he said, not unkind. Amanda and Thomas and Karen and Kevin stood in the aperture of the door like they were looking into a mouth. Marta stayed by the threshold, hands folded tight against her stomach. "We keep it clean," she murmured. "We really do." The officers moved with gloved care. Photographs, measurements. The red toolbox opened on smooth hinges. Inside, sockets sorted by size, a thermometer pen, a coil of mint-flavored dental floss that looked wildly wrong until Amanda remembered her own notes, the ghost of mint in the bag, and saw the logic. Floss for threads, not for teeth. The fastidious tie of a left-handed person trying to coax a stubborn string through a seam. The notebook on the table carried dates, times, and short notations in tidy block letters. October 31st, 2022, 8:26, radio on, 2 short knocks. November 3rd, peanut butter cup, folded square. A page from spring had a sketched rectangle with a grid and numbers across the top, C123. 17. Below it, a list. Keys, wrappers, practice, wait. On the bottom edge of the page, Amanda recognized a small diagonal line like the beginning of a 7. "Jesus," Kevin whispered. He didn't mean it as a prayer. He meant it as a summons to reality. Somebody's practicing. The officer lifted a clear bag from a shelf. Inside, wrappers folded into squares, a dozen, each nearly identical. Next to them, a square of orange cotton with frayed edges, cut from fabric like the bags. The officer looked at Amanda, then away. "Crafting," he said softly, as if the room asked for lower volume. At the back of the unit, beside a stack of cedar, a plastic milk crate held Halloween decorations. A string of skeletal lights, a plastic skull with one cracked tooth, a child's paper crown with a hand-drawn pumpkin face. On top sat a woven bracelet the color of lake water. Amanda did not reach for it. She looked at Thomas instead. His mouth had thinned to a line he used when he did arithmetic in his head. "Photograph everything," the officer said to his partner, and the camera made the gentle cricket sound of shutters. A label on the toolbox lid caught the flash, "Craftsman." Amanda remembered the red box in the gas station video and the elbow in a canvas jacket, and felt the chain link that connected details pulled taut enough to hum. They found no wallet, no mail, no name. "They know the rules," Kevin said. The officer closed the notebook and bagged it. Before he did, Amanda read 2 words at the bottom of a page. Not a signature, not even a word. 2 shapes a child might write when practicing letters. A K and an M. Karen Miller turned toward the light. "I taught him to make that M with 2 mountains," she said, voice steady and shredded at once. She pressed her knuckles to her mouth. Amanda did not move to touch her. There are kinds of touch that feel like interruption. She stood 1 pace away and let her mother lean into air. Marta cleared her throat. "We can replace the lock," she offered, practical kindness shining through the fear that all this would become her responsibility. The officer shook his head. "We'll seal it for now." He slid a numbered tag into the shackle space. Amanda watched the tiny flag hang there like a red tongue. Outside, wind pushed grit into teeth. Kevin held the door for everyone and said nothing until they were halfway to the cars. "He's left-handed," he said, like a man staking a flag. "Look at the tape tiers. They lean left." Amanda wrote it down. Left-hand tier patterns. Mint floss. C17, notebook, cedar, toolbox, bracelet, KM. She did not write Nathan's name. She put the whistle in her pocket and felt its cheap ridges like a pulse she could measure. That night, she dreamed in smells, cedar, oil, mint, sugar. When she woke, she knew without knowing how that the unit was not a trap. It was a workshop, a place where someone had been trying to build a ritual that fit. 2 blasts. Wait. Fold the candy into squares so a mother would understand care when words were too heavy to lift. The police kept the notebook. Amanda kept the work of being a person. Classroom, attendance sheets, a parent conference, where a boy's mother asked if late essays could be forgiven because grief made time buckle. "Yes," Amanda said, grief changes clocks, and then needed to sit alone in the dark of her car at lunch to remember where her body ended. She called Front Range HVSC. The receptionist said employee information could not be shared. Amanda expected that. She asked if the company had any trucks reported stolen near Halloween. "None," the woman said, "but we have a lot of contractors with their own vehicles." Amanda thanked her and made a list of HVAC companies with green logos. There were more than she wanted, and set it aside. Not yet. CALM is also an investigative method. The young officer called to say prints were smeared or gloved, DNA unlikely from wrappers handled and rehandled. "We're canvassing storage renters on the C row," he said. "It's a lot." Another apology sneaked under his words and tried to sit down. Amanda folded it a chair of grace and kept speaking in complete sentences. "I'd like retired Detective Donovan looped in," she said. "He knows the original case." There was a pause. "I can't authorize that," he said, "but I can't stop you from talking to a private citizen." So she drove to a small duplex where Charles Donovan had lived since the year he stopped carrying a badge. He opened the door in a flannel shirt, hair thinner, scar at his temple paler. The living room smelled like wool and the faint lemon of oiled wood. He took one look at the bagged photo and the copy of the receipt and the printed still from the wildlife cam and said, "Tired and tender, you were supposed to stop needing to see me." The words were not a reprimand. They were a sad blessing. Donovan listened with his whole head. He asked few questions and asked them only once. "Left-handed," he said, tapping the printed still, "and neat. That fold on the wrappers? Neuromuscular consistency. Either practice or compulsion. You can't tell which yet." He studied the C-17 key. "We opened a C row unit in 2011, he added. "Not this one. Different renter. Man kept garage sale junk and a canoe with a hole. It smelled like mouse." His face softened, the kind of softness older men offer when memory is the only gift left. "Your brother liked to list things," he said to Amanda gently, like handing her back a penny she had dropped. When we talked to him about safety the week before Halloween, he said, 2 blasts. Wait. Stay by the maple. Don't talk to strangers." He counted them on his fingers. 4 rules. Donovan held up his hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. The chalk skeleton at the corner had 4 fingers drawn on the right hand. Amanda felt the world tilt and set again. Foreshadowing wants to be seen in hindsight. She trained herself to see it standing up. Thomas, upon hearing Donovan would come by the house, polished a radio until its dial showed his face in a round blur. When Donovan sat at their table, Karen set a cup of tea by his hand, and then, after a moment, slid a saucer of wrapped peanut butter cups between them. None of them ate one. Amanda watched Donovan read her spiral notebook notes with the care of a man calibrating a machine. He said, "What you have is a pattern and a point of contact. C-17 is an invitation. They gave you a key because they want you to open something and see what they want you to see." "What if C-17 is a misdirection?" Kevin asked from the doorway, his headlamp looped around his wrist like a worry stone. "Then the misdirection will have edges," Donovan said. "We look for the edges." They went back to the facility the next day at noon, this time with Donovan, walking 3 steps behind them, like a ghost of procedures past. Marta eyed him with the automatic respect of someone who recognizes a cop even when he's a civilian. The unit remained sealed. The officer with the tool roll met them and broke the evidence tag to allow a more thorough search, this time with Amanda present, as the camera logged the discovery like a documentary of patience. They found no wallet, no mail again, but they found tape shadows on the wall where pages once were. They found a calendar with months torn away, so only a year in the corner remained, 2020. On the inside cover, in pencil, nearly erased, a phrase waited under light. 2 loops, cross, pull. Amanda did not cry. She did not smile. She put her palm on the tabletop and felt grain. Kevin whispered, "He remembered your shoe lesson." Karen turned her face toward the unit door and breathed out. Inside the red toolbox, under a tray of wrenches, lay a spare disc lock still in packaging and a tiny cassette recorder, the cheap kind kids used to make mixtapes before phones. There was a tape inside, labeled in block letters, 826. The officer looked at Amanda, then inserted the cassette into a bagged portable player Marta produced like a magic trick from the office Lost and Found. The room filled with the thin, flat world of tape, a faint hum, a rustle, a two-note whistle, peep, peep, and then the hiss of nothing. Amanda's mouth found the shape of the sound before it left the speaker. She had trained her ear to it at 12. Donovan bowed his head as if at a graveside and said, not to anyone, practice. On a high shelf behind a bundle of cedar they found a shoebox. Inside, photographs, Polaroids and 4x6 prints, some film processed, some inkjet. Kids in costumes in years after 2009, photographed from a distance at different porches around town, always shoulder down, never faces. Privacy like a vow. A few were of the Miller porch, the bowl with Take One notes in Amanda's handwriting, the flickering light. A hand reaching. Thomas's? Amanda could not tell, from inside the frame to adjust the candle in the window. There was one of a left forearm, the same pale scar along the ulna, resting on a concrete step. On the wrist, a woven bracelet the color of lake water. The hand held a pencil. The pencil had written, on a small notepad, C-17. Amanda expected fear to climb her spine. Instead, something else rose. Organization. She sorted the photos by year based on wrappers and decorations. Kevin pointed out weather clues in the frames. Donovan, from habit, checked shadows for time of day, pattern, practice, patience. Whoever had made this place had been teaching himself how to approach without breaking. How to set an object down with the care of a teacup so a house would accept it. The young officer found a badge fragment under the folding table, a scratched oval of embroidered edge with threads the color of a storm. Front Range could be read if you knew how to read missing things. Amanda reached toward it and stopped herself. She wrote what she saw. No leaps. A bracelet lay on the cedar bundle a foot away, the lake water weave loose at one end, like someone had taken it off in haste or relief. The officer bagged both. When they were done, the officer resealed the unit. "We'll run these through," he said, a promise he meant, and a machine that might not fully allow. Donovan stood with his hands in his pockets, like a man resisting the urge to sweep dust away from a fact. "He's trying to talk," he said, "with objects." "What about the KM in the notebook?" Karen asked. Voice so small Amanda wanted to build a chair for it. Donovan shook his head. "Initials can be rope or rabbit holes. Don't lean on them until they hold." He looked at Thomas. "Your radio's at 826? They chatter, then go dead," Thomas said, like a signal passed by the garage and kept walking. That night Amanda could not make herself look at the dog shelter website. She flushed the page from her tabs like a guilt she had not earned. She took the whistle into the backyard and tried one experiment she had written in her notebook and then avoided. She blew one short note. Silence. She waited. Blew two short notes. Somewhere, faint as breath under a door, a radio voice said, "Copy," and then went away. She did not tell anyone. You can drown narrative with too many stones. The next day, she and Kevin drove past Front Range HVAC on Broadway just to see. Men loaded ducting into a truck. A dark green pickup with a camper shell sat in the lot, older body style, paint oxidized to a soft matte. On its bumper, a faded sticker, a mountain silhouette, and the word Minnewanka, a lake in Canada. Kevin made a low sound. The bracelet's color. Lake water. Amanda kept her eyes forward. They did not stop. They did not confront. That is not how you survive a story. Instead, they visited Boulder High after hours. Amanda had permission to access maintenance logs. Her principal had learned years ago that when she asked for something, it was not frivolous. Kevin scanned the key indexing sheets for anything labeled C-17. "Cages run AB," he said, "and no C here." They checked the community college where Thomas taught, A1, A12, as before. They checked the city storage yards. Codes ran on dates, not letters. Each no sanded the edges of a yes they could not name. At home, Karen unrolled a child-sized denim jacket from the bottom of a cedar bundle left resting by their door an hour after sunset. No camera caught the delivery. The jacket was size 7, sleeves shortened, and hem let out in a neat line. Inside the cuff, a seam bore Karen's distinctive double stitch, the same uneven X Amanda had felt on the bag's corner. Karen's breath shortened to small warm squares. "I did this," she said, touching the seam. "He wore this the week before Halloween for school. It got chilly." Her fingers found a pocket. Inside, a folded wrapper, the peanut butter cup brand, creased in the exact square the porch deliveries had copied. Karen's shoulders shook once. She did not cry. She set the jacket on the table like it was sleeping and smoothed the denim as if it could wrinkle in dreams. Amanda wrote a sentence and boxed it. "Whoever is leaving things was present in 2009 or has access to objects from that fall." She added a second box. "He is not mocking us. He is building a language." Kevin looked at the jacket for a long time. "We need to know if the woven bracelet means anything," he said at last. "Could be a school program, a camp, a hospital ward." Amanda nodded. "I'll ask the nurse at school," she said, "and the art teacher." The nurse remembered a coping skills workshop in 2018 that handed out woven bracelets the color of calm. The art teacher remembered a river cleanup that same year where kids braided paracord by the creek. The librarian produced a yearbook photo of a senior boy wearing a bracelet that looked close but not exact. None of these facts lined up with the scar or the left-handedness or the precise folds. But they formed a cloud over the same part of town. 2 nights later, the porch light did its stutter once, as if reminding itself of a roll. At 8:26 the doorbell chimed a single time. Amanda opened to empty air and a manila envelope on the mat. Inside, a photocopy of a maintenance roster from a storage company, not Marta's, a different facility farther east. Someone had circled a line in pencil, C-17, cleared 2016, renter deceased. In the margin, a left-leaning arrow in soft graphite pointed to a note. Fees paid in cash thereafter. No name, no signature. Just handwriting Amanda could have picked out of a lineup of 1,000. The same block letters from the storage notebook, the same diagonal beginning of a 7. She brought the envelope inside and placed it next to the denim jacket and the key and the business card. Objects as sentences, sentences as a paragraph. The paragraph did not yet make a chapter, but the chapter had a working title, Return with Care. Amanda dialed Donovan. He answered on the second ring. "We have an envelope," she said, and read it to him exactly. No adjectives. He exhaled. "They're either trying to keep you safe while giving you directions," he said, "or they don't trust the system to deliver you to the door on time." "Or both," Amanda said. He came over. They spread the pieces under the kitchen light. Thomas's radio murmured and went still at 8:26 like a shy child asked to speak. Donovan tapped the circled 2016. "We had a neighbor in 2009, he said slowly, who owned a green pickup with a camper shell and used to keep cedar for his wife's garden beds. He moved to assisted living in 2015, died the next year. His son sold the house. I don't remember a storage unit, but it wouldn't surprise me." "What was his name?" Amanda asked. Donovan shook his head. "I don't trust my memory for names anymore. I'll pull the file." Amanda watched him fight his own brain gently to a draw. She felt something like weather shift in the room, anticipation or storm. She looked down at the whistle on the table and understood what the next correct action was. Tomorrow, she said, we go back to C-17 with a warrant and open the red toolbox again. We missed something. Donovan nodded, pleased with the muscle memory of a plan. We always miss something the first time, he said. That's why we go back. When they did, Marta let them in with the measured grace of a person who has decided to be on the right side of a story, even if the story bleeds on her paperwork. The officer cut the seal. The door rolled. The smell of cedar and oil rose like a hymn that knows only one verse. Amanda went straight to the toolbox and lifted the tray with both hands. Beneath, the wrenches were bedded like bones. She felt along the underside of the lid and touched tape. Blue painter's tape. Something thin lived there, caught and flat. She peeled the tape slowly, the way you lift a bandage from skin you still need. A strip of photo paper came away, not a full print, just the white margin with a lab code and a date, 10/31/2009. No subject, no faces, just proof that a roll had been developed that week. Next to the code, a fragment of black corner like the edge of a child's shoulder in a skeleton costume, if you wanted to believe in miracles. Amanda did not need the picture. She needed the date. She slid the strip into a bag and wrote the number as if carving. Donovan smiled with exactly one side of his mouth. "You were right," he said. "We missed something." Before they closed the unit, Amanda looked at the pegboard and measured the distance between holes with her fingers. At home, the garage pegboard above Thomas's radios shared the same pattern. The photo of the skeleton boy on concrete could have been taken in any garage in the world, but the red toolbox and the cedar and the pegboard grid kept tightening the circle with quiet clicks. They sealed C-17 again. They drove back through town, past Front Range HVSC, past the corner with the maple where chalk had washed away in last night's rain, past a boy in a skeleton hoodie who ran laughing toward a father with his arms wide. Amanda watched them in the mirror until they were small. At home, the porch held nothing. She put the whistle in her pocket anyway and took the trash out because someone always has to. On her way back in, a sound came from the radio in the garage, a soft, two-note peep-peep. She stopped. The whistle stayed in her pocket. The radio clicked off. In the stillness, a memory rose, not a fact, a gesture. Nathan at 6, touching the orange bag with one hand, as if to steady it while he counted rules with the other. Amanda stood at the door and understood the shape of the partial answer they had. Someone had built a language from their rules and their objects and had been speaking it, gently, from the edges of their lives for years. The question that remained was the one that had taught her patience. Who? The doorbell rang once. On the mat lay an envelope thicker than before. Inside, a photocopy of a driver's license belonged to a man who had died in 2016. The neighbor Donovan could not quite name. Clipped to it by a straight pin was a single hair-thin strip of orange cotton, the same weave as the bag, pierced and held by the pin like a pinned butterfly. On the bottom of the copy, in pencil, left leaning, one word sat by itself, almost. The word on the photocopy wouldn't stop glowing, almost. Amanda put it at the top of the spiral page and boxed it, then drew a second box under it. Why not yet? She turned the pencil in her fingers the way she taught freshmen to turn a thesis, looking for grain, not splinters. Karen brewed tea and forgot to drink it. Thomas turned a radio dial that had long ago lost the needle. It hummed obediently at 8:26 and slipped back to quiet. Retired Detective Charles Donovan returned with a manila folder that looked older than the porch boards. "I pulled what I could without a badge," he said, laying down copies. A 2015 property tax record, a 2016 obituary, 2 neighborhood complaints about a loud compressor in 2013, and a listing for an estate sale that never ran. The obituary held the name their minds had been reaching for. Gerald Lake, 79, retired machinist. Survived by son Evan Lake, local contractor. Liked to whittle cedar for raised garden beds. The page smelled faintly like the lemon oil in Donovan's living room, as if it had carried the air along when it left. "The Lakes lived 3 houses down in 2009, Donovan said quietly. Gerald kept a green pickup with a camper shell. He was a good neighbor, the kind who slid your trash can back to the curb when the wind took it. He'd been sharp as a tack, then not sharp, then tired. I didn't put a red pin on him at the time. That's on me." Amanda's pencil hovered. Green pickup, camper shell, cedar. The words snapped into the grid she'd already drawn. "If Gerald found Nathan at the corner," she said carefully, "and thought he was helping—" "Then the help turned into keeping," Donovan finished, not theatrical, merely honest. "Dementia can turn intent into knots no one knows how to untie." Thomas's jaw worked. "He could have knocked on our door." "He might have, in his head," Donovan said. They pushed the coffee table aside and spread the inventory. Key C-17, business card with storage logo. Notebook from the unit with KM penciled at the bottom of a page. Wrappers folded into identical squares. The mint dental floss that had no teeth near it. The bracelet the color of lake water. The photo strip with a lab code dated 10/31/2009. The red toolbox photos. The milk crate of Halloween trinkets. The faint graphite arc by the peephole. Every item hummed the same sentence, not a taunt, a language. Amanda tried a thought aloud. "What if KM isn't initials?" she said, finger on the notebook reproduction. "What if it's keep mom, a reminder, a goal, keep mom in the picture?" Karen's hand went to her mouth. Then she laughed, one hiccup of sound that was not mirth, not grief, but an exhale where a cry would have been. "He always wrote M as 2 mountains," she said. "I told him to. Easy to remember." Donovan pinched the bridge of his nose and smiled into the gesture like a man finding the lost end of a thread. "I'm old enough to like the explanations with fewer villains," he said. "Let's see if the world will give us one." The phone rang. Marta from the storage facility. "I don't want to get in the way," she said, "but someone tried to access C-17 this morning. The lock's secure, they didn't open it. The camera caught a slice, can't see a face. Left arm. There's a bracelet, same color as your photo." Amanda felt her heart do the opposite of panic. It organized. "Could you hold the frame for us?" she asked. Face. Left arm. There's a bracelet, same color as your photo. Amanda felt her heart do the opposite of panic. It organized. "Could you hold the frame for us?" she asked. "Don't print, just don't let it overwrite." Marta exhaled her answer. "Consider it held." They drove out. Amanda, Kevin, Donovan, past the brown fields and the single billboard that pitched hot tubs to people who believed winter should come with bubbles. The storage office had a shut-door quiet that belongs to rooms waiting to be useful. Marta pointed at the monitor, paused on a pixelated still. An elbow and wrist entered the frame at the bottom right of C-17's camera, left-handed, the same pale line of a healed scar along the ulna, the same lake water bracelet. The left hand made a motion like measuring space, an old carpenter's habit. It left a manila envelope on the concrete and vanished. Marta slid on gloves and handed them the envelope by its corners. Inside, a cassette labeled in the tidy block that had named 826 on the other tape, and a single sheet of paper with 4 bullet points, 2 blasts. Wait, do it slow, and it stays. KM Tuesday. "The man writes in rules," Donovan murmured, like someone who learned safety by rehearsal. They brought the cassette to the Miller dining table and played it on Thomas's old player. Tape hiss rose like cicadas in July. Then a 2-note whistle sounded, soft, practiced, and the faintest voice, older than the 8-year-old in Amanda's memory, and younger than a man who'd stopped trying to sound like anything other than himself. The voice did not say words at first, it said breaths, measured in 2-2-1 counts, then almost. Silence. 2 more quiet notes. Then, at the end, 6 syllables, careful, like walking across a frozen creek. "Amanda, blow the whistle once." Click. Kevin swore under his breath, the kind you say to mark the size of a thing, not to curse it. Thomas's hands shook. He flattened them on the table until his knuckles went pale. Karen sat down. "That's not a stranger," she said. "That's a student. He's learned a way to get to the door." Amanda pressed her lips together until the feeling under them turned from ache to structure. "KAM," she said again. "Keep Mom, and Tuesday. We need to know which Tuesday he means." Donovan checked his calendar. "Tomorrow is Tuesday." "Then tomorrow," Amanda said. The teacher in her voice returned. "We'll follow his rules. 2 blasts. Wait. Do it slow. Keep Mom." Donovan lifted a palm. "We also looped the officer," he said. "No cowboy nonsense." "Ranch adjacent, then," Amanda said, "because a joke is sometimes a towel you hand to a drowning person so they'll remember their hands." She called the officer, who sounded both concerned and relieved to be included. He asked to place a plainclothes car 2 blocks down, no lights, no noise. He asked that they record the attempt and protect the porch from neighbors with opinions. Amanda agreed. Protection without spectacle. Procedure without theater. That night Amanda could not read. She shelved books by height, a useless, satisfying task, and set out items on the hall table the way you set out shoes for a morning run: whistle, key, tape recorder, bracelet photo, the photo strip with the 2009 lab code. She placed the orange bag by the door like a dare to the future and a gift to the past. Karen hemmed a pair of jeans because a needle in a familiar path is a spell smarter than any prayer she knew. Thomas checked the porch light bulb and laughed once at himself for checking a thing that had betrayed him when it flickered for years and then did not. At 8:20 p.m. the radios muttered at the edge of hearing. At 8:26 they sighed back to quiet. Amanda slept without dreams and woke feeling as if she'd traveled. In the morning she taught the telltale heart without saying the word heart. She showed her students how sound can be a narrator. She watched a girl in the 3rd row press her palms to her thighs when the room went quiet and thought how many rooms in America held the same quiet, the same hands. At 7:55 p.m., Kevin arrived with his headlamp around his neck and a bag of tacos no one would eat. Donovan came with a wool cap and the look of a man who still remembered what his body did in doorways. Karen folded a dish towel in half, then in half again, until it was a square the size of a wrapped candy. Thomas moved the radio to the porch so it could hum at the exact edge of Inside and Out. Amanda stood with the whistle in her mouth and the orange bag in her hand. She looked at the clock. 8:25. She blew 2 short notes and waited. The waiting fit her like a coat finally cut right. Nothing at first. Then the radio made a sound, not a word, a copy from a dispatch. Thin, far. The porch light stuttered once, like it remembered its role. A shape moved at the end of the walk. Amanda couldn't name it yet. The brain loves nouns. But it moved like someone who had practiced moving with care in small spaces. Left-handed, the arm closest to her carried a small paper bag. The right hand lifted, palm open, shoulder angled, non-threat, old as mammals. The bracelet lay against the wrist like a remembered lake. The shape stopped at the bottom step. The porch floor was the line you do not cross until someone says so. The hand extended and set the paper bag on the top step. The motion was deliberate, as if setting down a teacup in a sleeping house. Then the hand withdrew and rested at his side. The head stayed bowed. Amanda did not step forward. She turned the whistle in her fingers, slid it into her pocket, keep Mom, and stepped back. Karen stepped into the doorway. Her hands were empty. She looked for a long time. The shape straightened an inch, like a sapling finding sun. The paper bag held a wallet, a folded printout, and a small spiral notebook with corners rounded from years in a pocket. The wallet contained cash and a temporary ID, Noah Lake, with a photo that made Amanda's spine want to invent wings and fly out of the room. The eyes were older. The mouth was a different man's. The left ulna scar showed in the photo's edge. The address was a P.O. box. The printout was a 2011 ER discharge from a pediatric urgent care across town. Male, approx. 9 to 10, no ID brought by G. Lake. Neighbor, left forearm fracture, splinted, discharged to guardian with follow-up instructions. A handwritten note at the bottom, patient prefers nonverbal, calm with rules. The spiral held 4 pages of lists, rules, places, times, words he could say on short breath, without the back of his throat closing. Amanda's lip trembled at Amanda, sound spelled like a chord chart. Donovan's breath left him in a soft "oh." He did not say "case closed." He did not say anything that would trap the room under a sentence. He looked at the shape at the bottom step and took 1 step sideways, so Karen stood at the center. Karen put 1 hand on the door jamb to remind her body to be a body. She set the other hand out, palm up, as if measuring a hem. "I hemmed your sleeves too short," she said, voice cracked and dignified. "I always did." The shape made a sound like shoes on gravel and no other sound. The left hand lifted a few inches, then fell. He was not ready yet. The page had asked for Tuesday, but the heart had veto power. Kevin leaned close to Amanda without moving his feet. "Noah," he said, tasting the name. "It's him." "It's him," Amanda said, and let the sentence be a raft and not a spear. The shape at the step, Noah on paper, Nathan in the house, touched the bracelet like checking for a map. He nodded once, small as if to himself, and stepped back down 1 pace. He was writing with distance, the language he'd built, almost. 2 blasts. Wait. Keep Mom. The porch radio burred once, obedient, then fell quiet. Karen nodded back, the way mothers nod when babies swing their arms to negotiate bedtime. "Tomorrow," she said, as if the word were a ribbon she could lay over something fragile to keep it from drying out. "Tomorrow you knock at 8:26 and come to the first stair." The shape nodded again and went away like a burden that has decided to be carried by its owner and no one else. When he was gone, Amanda opened the spiral to the last page. 1 word waited alone. Almost. Under it, in small, careful print, KM. She flipped to the inside back cover and found 4 squares of wrappers, taped in peanut butter cups, creased identical. Below them, a note. "Fold like Mom folds fabric. Square, not triangle." Her throat hurt in a place that had not made noise since childhood. She closed the spiral and understood. Not an abduction, not a ghost, but a continuum of help turned wrong, and a boy who had grown into a man teaching himself how to come home without breaking the people he loved. They did not sleep. Thomas carried the radio in and out, testing outlets as if electricity itself were a witness he could subpoena. Karen laid the denim jacket on a chair and pressed the cuffs smooth again. Amanda wrote until the pencil complained. Kevin went home and came back with coffee. Donovan went home and came back with nothing because what he was bringing was almost purely made of time. At noon on Tuesday, the officer parked 2 blocks down. Marta texted that she'd stay alert. Donovan sat at the dining room table with his hands folded, as if a judge might walk in. At 8:23 it began to snow, the light dry kind that looks like ash if you don't know where you are. At 8:26 the doorbell rang once. Karen stood first. She opened the door to the first stair. He stood at the edge of the step like an apprentice in a new shop. Canvas jacket, cap low, bracelet bright in the porch light. The scar on the left ulna was a chalk line. He kept his body small in the way, learned by people who have lived in rooms where space had to be negotiated gently. He looked up once, quickly, and Amanda saw Nathan's eyes, not the color, not the lashes, but the alert, precise way he took in distance, light, edges. The boy who lined up toy cars by color, the boy who didn't like triangles. Amanda wanted to say everything and chose one thing. "I'm Amanda," she said, because he had asked for that word on the tape. She set the orange bag on the stair between them, the way people set treaty objects between tribes. She did not reach. He blew the two-note whistle, barely audible, more breath than sound, and waited. Karen did the same, exactly one beat after, like a call and response they hadn't rehearsed, and had rehearsed all their lives. He moved one step up. The wood gave a small sigh. Thomas lifted the radio's volume one notch. A voice, faint as patience, said, "Copy," and then dissolved into air. The snow agreed to fall for a while and then consider stopping. The officer's phone vibrated in Donovan's pocket. He didn't look. The world could wait 5 minutes. "May I see your left arm?" Amanda asked, voice steady and soft. He turned his wrist without being asked twice, the habit of a person used to showing a nurse or a teacher what needed inspecting. The scar traced a long, pale river where a bone had once made a wrong choice, and a doctor had persuaded it to choose again. Amanda nodded and let him see her right, left ulna scar in the spiral like a blessing, not an evidence line. Karen set a folded dish towel on the rail, the exact size of a wrapper square. "Do you want to come in?" she asked, then, crucially, added the rule he had asked for. "You can stand at the first stair if that feels safer." He looked at the threshold as if measuring it with a tape that only he could see. "Almost," he said, and Amanda almost laughed because he was consistent, and she loved consistency like a road sign. He reached into his jacket and took out a folded photograph, creases soft from thumb. He held it out on flat palm. Amanda did not take it. She let him place it on the stair. The photo showed the Miller porch in 2018, "Take one bowl." Amanda's handwriting, a child's pirate in the far background, and on the extreme edge, the left hand of a man setting down a folded square. On the wrist, the bracelet. On the matte corner, a smudge of graphite. On the lower right, in tiny block letters, the beginning of a 7. Amanda slid the photo onto the bag and felt something click. He had been approaching for years. A sequence, not hiding, practicing arrival. Donovan stepped forward to where a man might stand to greet a man. "I'm Charles," he said. "I worked your case when you were little. I made mistakes. I will make fewer now." Nathan looked at him quick, like checking the weather. He nodded once. Donovan nodded back. "Can you tell us about Gerald Lake?" Amanda asked. Non-accusatory. In Gerald's house, verbs had to be negotiated. She offered Nathan the smallest possible bridge. He tapped the bracelet with his right hand, then the C-17 key on the rail, then the orange bag. His left hand shaped a box in the air, storage, then a circle, home, and then touched his chest with 2 fingers. When words came, they came in a string like beads spaced by breath. "Truck, cold," he said, "warm, help, house rules, no police." "Too loud, garden beds, cedar, practiced," he forgot. Then died. He lifted his shoulders in a careful, not shrug. Evan, scared, said, "Keep safe." Donovan's face did what good faces do when pain tells the truth. It didn't flinch. "Evan Lake kept you out of sight," he said, confirming without accusing. Nathan touched his left forearm. "Broken?" He pointed at the spiral. "List. No noise. Rules." His voice eased minutely, as if nouns relieved something nouns had once wounded. Amanda kept the thread. 2011 ER? She asked gently, tapping the discharge. He nodded. "Gerald said grandson." He shaped the word with a half-smile, like a child trying a big shoe. "No words, then?" "Learned later. Slow." Karen's cheeks wet themselves without asking permission. Tears sat there bright as candy wrap. "You were not lost because you were bad," she said, careful as stitches. "You were lost because grown-ups got scared." He nodded twice, quick, like a reflex. Then, "I paid C-17. He touched the key, his chest, the key. "After cash." He drew a mountain in the air with 2 peaks, M, and Amanda's chest went hot. Not Karen Miller, not Keep Mom. Or not only those, mountains. How he wrote M. how his mother taught him. He had been writing his name in the margins all along, the way children do when the page seems too white for courage. Kevin spoke for the first time, voice scraped. "I asked for one more block that night," he said, "not seeking absolution, only storage. I did." "I'm sorry?" Nathan looked at him and did not tilt his head or narrow his gaze. He just lifted the bracelet to eye level and looked through it like a lens at Kevin's face, then lowered it and nodded, as if placing a file in a drawer. Known. Kevin nodded back, the way men nod when they refuse to break in public. Amanda still needed the twist to lock into place. "Who left the envelopes? Who wrote almost? Who set the wrappers and the leaf with the knot?" she asked, her voice low. He lifted his left hand. "Me." Then, after a breath, "Evan. Drove. Me. Folded." He shaped a square in the air with forefingers and thumbs. Square, not triangle. Learned. Oi. He spelled it on his palm. Occupational therapy. Amanda felt the shiver of coherence go through the room like a train gliding past a platform. Wind, speed, certainty. Donovan exhaled through his nose, pleased to be surprised and not ashamed to say so. "So the hand on the wildlife cam," he said, "the lefty with the scar." "Me," Nathan said again, and did not apologize for surviving in a way that looked like mystery from the outside. Karen eased one toe over the threshold. "You wrote almost because you wanted us to keep breathing long enough to do it right," she said. He nodded, and then something unlatched behind his face. It wasn't a sob exactly. It was a release of a plan that had finally acquired an ending. "Where is Evan now?" Donovan asked, because safety is also part of endings. Nathan pointed east. "Front Range," then drew a rectangle in the air, office, and a square, locker, and wrote C-17 in the air again, the 7 starting with that diagonal strike that had wanted to be a 7 on every note. "Why 826?" Amanda whispered, because she had carried that number like a stone in her pocket. Nathan smiled very slightly, showing a flash of the boy who had counted rules on fingers. Porch, sensor, light. Did he tap the jam? In October, shadows, tree, switch. Oit! 26. Thomas made a sound that might have been a laugh if you added 20 years of heartbreak to it. "The damn maple," he said, "of course." The officer, 2 blocks down, texted Donovan. "You okay? Need me to come?" Donovan's thumbs wrote back, "We are okay. Stand by." He looked at Nathan. "I'm going to ask you a question that I will ask kindly and only once," he said. "Do you want to come inside tonight?" Nathan looked at the inside. He looked at his shoes. He lifted the orange bag, weighed it in his palm, and set it back down. He blew 1 short note, waited, then 2. He nodded. "Almost?" He smiled, small, true, and added a new word to the family's dictionary. "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow what?" Amanda asked, not to pin him, but to write it right. "You bring photo, in garage, pegboard." He tapped the air like he was hanging a frame. "We match holes." He made a small rectangle with his fingers, then tapped the red toolbox picture. "Mine." His eyes flicked to Thomas. "Yours?" A link. He was drawing a map where the lines were patterns, not roads. He stepped back down 1 stair. Karen nodded again, the nod that said everything a verb could not. He went. The snow decided to stop. The porch light held steady. They gathered around the table like people at the last train of the night, counting tickets. Donovan outlined a plan with the ease of a man who had always preferred plans to miracles. Meet at C-17 with officers, and Marta. Contact Evan through Front Range to remove him from the role of driver and place him in the role of witness. Bring the photo of the pegboard and the red toolbox. Wear microphones because rooms distort voices and lawyers like transcripts. "We aim for a safe re-entry," he said. "We do not force a door. He has been building a ritual that fits. We meet him where he is." Amanda slept nobly and badly. In the morning, she borrowed the photo from the evidence bag, long enough to make a 2-scale overlay of the pegboard grid on tracing paper, counting hole spacing by millimeters. Kevin printed the cam stills of the left hand and wrote lefty in the corner, then erased it until the paper furred and wrote it again smaller, as if whispering would help. Karen packed a tote with the orange bag wrapped in tissue like a wedding dress, and the denim jacket folded once, not twice, to avoid a crease on the cuff where her double stitch was. Thomas tuned the radio to the station that just happened to whisper when you needed it to. They parked at the facility at 7:58 p.m. Marta met them with her braid tucked into a knit cap. The officer unsealed the door to C-17. The unit breathed them in, cedar, oil, a shadow of mint like a polite guest. The red toolbox waited on its cart as if it had expected them all day. The pegboard above the table held hooks like punctuation. Amanda taped her tracing paper to the pegboard with blue painter's tape, matching the whole grid from the photo. The alignment was uncanny and ordinary at once, like fitting a shirt you had outgrown and then grown back into. The hook scars on the board kissed the dots on the overlay. She marked 3 with an X, the same uneven X Karen always sewed in corners. At 8:26 on the phone clock, footsteps approached on gravel, slow, deliberate. A door of a green pickup somewhere nearby clicked shut. The officer cleared his throat softly in the way that is not a warning but a memo to yourself to be a person. Donovan lifted a hand, wait. A figure stopped at the lip of the unit and did the palm open gesture. The bracelet was there. The scar was there. He did not cross. He pointed at the pegboard, then at the tracing paper, and smiled the way a craftsman smiles when a jig fits. Match, he said, and the word was a bell. Amanda stepped aside so Karen could take the center. Karen lifted the orange bag from the tote and held it at the waist, not offered forward, just present. Nathan's eyes went to the double stitch in the corner. He nodded. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a small plastic bag with a fragment of photo, the missing black corner that completed the strip she'd found taped under the toolbox lid. He set it on the cart, flush against the strip's torn edge, and watched the line become whole. Thomas made the sound he had been born holding back, a soft, stunned laugh. "That's my garage pegboard," he said. "That's our boy." Nathan took a breath that sounded like life. He looked at Donovan, then at the officer, then at Karen. He stood very still, then did his own rule. 2 short notes on the whistle, tiniest breath, barely sound. He stepped over the threshold. He was inside. The officer said nothing, because good officers know silence can be the best paperwork. Donovan exhaled slowly through his mouth like a swimmer surfacing. Kevin cried in the stupid, grateful way boys grow into men cry, shoulders shaking twice, then a shoulder rub that did not require eye contact. Amanda set the tracing paper down and felt the more significant paper align, history to now. "Almost," Nathan said, not as a limit this time, but as a joke shared with a house that had waited correctly. He opened his left hand. In his palm lay a locker tag, C-17, identical to the one he had left on the mat. He placed it on the cart beside the reunited photo corner, then looked at Karen. Karen held the orange bag and said the rule he had written for her, 2 blasts. Wait, do it slow, and it stays. She walked toward him 1 step and stopped. He met her 1 step and stopped. They were a seam, converging. He lifted the bag's strap with 2 fingers and the care of a man picking up a teacup in a sleeping house. The radio in Thomas's hand gave a short squall, and through it, faint as a thread, a dispatcher somewhere said, "Copy." Nathan blinked hard and shook his head once, like dogs do in wind that is new and good. "Home," he said, testing the word. He took 1 more step, and the room found a new edge. A tall man stood at the far end of the row, hands in the pockets of a canvas jacket. Evan Lake. He looked like a man who had spent 10 years trying to outpace the wrong mistake at 6 miles an hour. The officer clocked him. Donovan clocked the officer clocking him. Amanda saw all of it and did not move because movement is sometimes the worst thing. Evan lifted his hands, palms forward. "I'm not here to take him," he said. His voice had the burr of men who work near fans. "I brought him for years, and then I learned to let him bring himself. He swallowed. "I'm sorry for the years I kept him. I was wrong and afraid. I told myself I was keeping him safe when I was keeping me safe." Karen's chin lifted. It was not forgiveness. It was a permit. "You can talk to the police," she said. "Then you can go." Evan nodded, deflated in a way that did not ask to be comforted. He looked at Nathan. "You wrote almost a lot," he said. "You get to write now." Nathan looked at the bracelet, at C-17, at the double stitch on the bag. He nodded once and reached into his pocket. He took out a small pencil, chewed at the end like a boy's, and wrote on the tracing paper in tidy block letters. The K and the M sat next to each other. He drew 2 mountains for the M, then, underneath, a new word in the same small hand, "Now." He looked at Karen, then at Amanda. "Mom," he said, and the mountains on the M stood up. Karen made a sound like a sail filling. Her hands shook once and then steadied. She moved the bag to her shoulder to keep her arms free and put both hands on either side of his face with the delicacy of a tailor, making the last invisible adjustment. She did not hug him, she held him, which is different. Donovan blinked 5 times fast. Ritual, not weakness. The officer lifted his radio and said, "We're good," in the same tone men use to announce weather. Amanda wrote the word "now" in her notebook and circled it twice. Then she looked at the red toolbox and knew there was one more thing inside, because mysteries do not leave rooms without checking their pockets. She slid the tray aside. Beneath it, taped to the bottom in blue painter's tape, lay a birth certificate copy request form, half filled. First name blank. Last name, Miller. A small X marked the signature line, not a signature, a placeholder. Do it slow, and it stays. Amanda looked up at Nathan and lifted an eyebrow. Question, not pressure. He nodded once, almost imperceptible. "Tomorrow," he said, smiling again, the smile of a man who has learned that endings are rooms, not doors. The radio gave one more soft peep and went quiet. Morning brought the kind of quiet that does not quite trust itself. Frost silvered the porch rail. The orange bag slept on a chair like a cat that had finally chosen a lap. Amanda wrote the day and date with a steadiness that felt earned, not borrowed. Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022. They started with the smallest rules. 2 blasts, wait. Do it slow, and it stays. Keep, Mom. Nathan texted from a flip phone. No punctuation. All facts. Him close. When the bell chimed once, he stood at the first stair, eyes level, palms visible. Karen opened the door and stepped back 1 pace, giving him the space to choose. He crossed to the second stair and stopped himself with the precision of a machinist. Progress, but not a flood. "Breakfast?" she asked. "Toast or eggs?" He touched his chest. "Toast," he said, then tapped the counter where the plate would go. She set a plate there and spread butter corner to corner because he had always noticed if you missed corners. Thomas flicked the radio on low and pretended to adjust a dial he had already adjusted. It hummed obediently and laid still, as if even it understood it had a line in today's script and must not forget it. Nathan took the toast in 2 hands, as if it might run. He ate without ceremony, the way hungry people eat in kitchens that smell right. He looked at the denim jacket folded over a chair, fingered the double stitch in the cuff, and nodded as if something in him had finally been given a name. "Mom," he said quietly, then again with less static. "Mom." Karen smiled with the serious joy of a woman fitting a final seam. "Yes," she said. No embroidery at all. "Yes." they went to the county clerk because the world requires paper for what hearts already know. Donovan met them on the steps, wool cap over ears, a clipboard tucked like an old habit. The clerk's office smelled like toner and winter boots. The woman behind the glass had a bun so tight it could have held a roof beam. Amanda presented the birth record request where a tiny X had waited under tape in the toolbox. The clerk read without flinching at history. "Name?" she asked, stylus poised. Nathan looked at Amanda and then at Karen. "Nathan Noah Miller," he said, testing the music of the three N's like marbles rolling in a palm. He breathed once through his nose, OT training, and signed carefully. His hand shook only on the second N. Karen dabbed a corner of her eye with a tissue she had folded twice, not 4 times, because today triangles were allowed to exist without trouble. In the hallway, Evan Lake waited with a patrol officer. No cuffs. His hands were out of his pockets, a small bravery. He had the sanded-down look of a man who knows that the story cannot be reshaped anymore. "I'm here to tell the truth," he said, and the sentence sounded like someone who had practiced on the way over. "I kept him because I was scared. I brought him because I finally learned fear is not a plan." Donovan put a palm up to hold the air steady. "We'll take your statement," he said. "We'll let facts weigh what they weigh." Evan nodded. He looked at Nathan, but did not approach. "I taught you the wrong rules," he said. "I'm sorry." Nathan tapped his bracelet, then his chest, then the door to the clerk's office, and said one word that did not forgive so much as catalog correctly. "Now." Evan's face went slack with a grief that had been waiting years for a clear label. He followed the officer down the hall. Amanda watched and did not watch, holding 2 truths gently in one palm, the gratitude for brought and the cost of kept. On the courthouse steps, Kevin stood with his headlamp in his pocket like a ritual charm. He had not slept. And when he smiled, the tired cracked it into realness. "Hey," he said to Nathan, keeping his voice below the level where words make pressure. "I was a dumb kid once. I asked for one more block. I'm sorry." Nathan measured distance with his eyes, then his foot, half a step closer, no more. He lifted his left hand and reached 2 fingers toward Kevin's shoulder, stopping a breath before touch, and tapped twice in the air. 2 blasts. The old rehearsal given back without shame. Kevin's throat went glassy. "Copy," he said, and the word felt better than sorry. They returned home by streets that had learned their angles. The maple dropped 1 leaf directly on the mat, as if auditioning for metaphor. Inside, Karen stood in the doorway and asked the house for help in saying hello. "Houses, remember?" The hall light made a warm oval on the floor that fell just short of the living room rug. Amanda remembered writing once that the light had been like a missing word. Today, it spelled something. The first step inside took 6 minutes. Nathan stared at the threshold like a mathematical problem. He braced himself in the jam and checked the height of the floor as if gravity could change its mind. Karen did not coax. She set the orange bag on the side table in easy view. She placed the pumpkin whistle on a coaster as if it might leave a ring. Thomas opened the drawer that all was stuck and left it open. A sign used in the early years to tell the world, "Someone will come back here." He had not closed it since Halloween 2009. Today, he slid it shut. The click was a small domestic music. Nathan looked up at the sound, nodded, and stepped onto the rug. He didn't go farther. Progress is not spectacle. He stood and breathed in the smell of laundry detergent, cedar, oil, mint, and the sweet dust of old books. He touched the photo taped to the wall near the doorframe, the Polaroid of 2 kids on a curb. He traced the square with 1 knuckle. "Amanda," he said, syllables careful. She laughed softly, the kind of laugh people make when a baby tries a word and you recognize it before the consonants do. "Yes," she said, relieved to still be someone with a name that could be remembered and not only a job, archivist, case manager, expector of bad news. Lunch was soup, because soup honors both caution and appetite. Nathan watched Karen blow on the spoon and did the same. He ate to the bottom, where a small potato always hides. Thomas told him about the radios, how at 8:26 they liked to pretend they were important. Nathan tipped his head a fraction, the way people do when a new fact enters the room and asks for a chair. "Copy," he said. And Thomas looked 12 for 3 seconds, and then 70 for 1, and then exactly his own age again. After, Amanda took Nathan to the garage. Quiet. Air the temperature of tools. She had taped her pegboard tracing to the wall over Thomas's bench. Nathan stepped forward, eyes scanning hole spacing and shadow scars, then extended a finger to tap the 3 X marks where the photo had once suggested hooks. He smiled, a small, honest thing. "Match," he said again, and then, surprising himself, he laughed. It wasn't loud. It was the sound of a screen door closing soft against its frame. He pointed at the radio. "Hiss," he said, and flicked the knob to a dead frequency, static like dry grass. His left hand drew a wave in the air. "Like Creek," he said, eyes crinkling like they did when he was 6, and they had tried to skip stones, and he'd been more interested in the rings. Amanda felt grief step back and make room for something else. "He's not a headline," she wrote later. "He's a person with static preferences." In the afternoon they followed another rule. Let the body be a body. Paper had consumed morning. Feelings can't eat dinner if you starve your legs. They walked 2 blocks. Nathan kept the bracelet in his fingers like a rosary. At the corner, a child in a skeleton hoodie sprinted toward a father. Nathan watched the arc of the run and the neat scoop of the catch and breathed out through his nose like a man choosing to let air change rooms. He pointed to the chalk smudge at the base of the maple, yesterday's skeleton washed to a faint ghost, and touched the trunk with the back of his fingers. "Almost," he said, but the word had dressed itself differently. It wore a grin. Evening pulled its chairs in. At 8:26 the radio murmured its participate and quit. Nathan stood at the second stair. Karen stood at the top, hands at her sides. Amanda stood on the landing, holding the spiral, but not writing, because there are moments you are meant to live without putting them on any shelf. Thomas, who had never prayed out loud, thought a sentence that sounded like one. "Let this hold." Nathan lifted the orange bag strap with 2 fingers and then set it down. He stepped one more step. He did not step past the threshold. A person's nervous system deserves a tip jar. Karen nodded the nod that says, "You are right to stop where you stop." He turned, descended, and left the porch light on. Back in the kitchen, Amanda saw something she had missed. On the back of the photo of the skeleton boy on concrete, under the tape seam, a faint pencil mark had lived, almost erased by time. She angled it in the light. The mark was not a letter. It was the beginning of a map, a line that went from a rectangle to a circle to a square, with the rectangle labeled Sihre Meinheinen in the smallest hand and the square labeled Home. Between them a little mountain shape drawn like an M. She laughed into the heel of her hand, not because it was funny, but because relief sometimes needs to leak out somewhere. She put the photo back and let the past keep its privacy. Some foreshadowing loves to be seen in hindsight, some loves being left alone because it already did its job. Night came with no drama. Nathan texted "good night," 2 words spelled right, then added a single mountain doodle. Karen left her sewing machine unplugged for the first time on a Halloween weeknight in 13 years. Thomas tuned a station and kept it there instead of surfing until static felt like company. Amanda opened the shelter tab she had kept open too long. Minerva, the old gray mutt, still waited. Amanda clicked adopt. 2 loops, cross, pull, she whispered to the world. Do it slow, and it stays. The next morning, the house learned a new ritual. Knock once, then say your name, even if everyone already knows it. Nathan started to use the front door like a local. He stood at the second stair and announced Nathan, as if turning a key in air. Karen said, "Come in if you want," and then stepped aside. He came to the rug. He put a palm on the doorframe. He laughed when the dog bed appeared in the corner like a prophecy that had finally chosen to be literal. Minerva arrived with a harness and a sigh. She chose Nathan the way old dogs choose the person most likely to move at the right speed. She pressed her forehead to his knee. He scratched behind one ear and said, "Good dog," in a voice calm enough to make plants grow. Amanda sat on the floor and cried as if water had been rationed and someone had lifted restrictions. They scheduled the thing they had avoided. A therapist who specialized in communication differences, and adults who had been children during bureaucracy. In a soft office where everything was brown or green, the therapist said impressive sentences that promised to repeat themselves: consent, pace, choice, sensory, safety. Nathan sat with his bracelet and practiced a new rule. If I show the whistle, it means stop. If I put it away, it means keep going. They wrote it down and taped it to the back of the front door like a fire escape map. Afternoons filled with small, ordinary chores that felt like sutures, changing a porch bulb without cursing, relabeling files so the tabs matched, teaching Minerva that squirrels are theater, not mission. Nathan helped Thomas in the garage, measuring cedar with a pencil he sharpened with a pocket knife and cleaned with mint floss when the lead crumbled. He was precise without scolding, patient without martyrdom. When he missed a mark by a hair, he smiled like a man who had learned to forgive the human side of a ruler. Evan met detectives and lawyers in rooms where coffee goes cold fast. He did not bargain so much as narrate. "My father found him," he said, eyes on the table. Dad called him Buddy and said he would take him home, but forgot what home meant. When Dad's mind left, he stayed. I told myself the boy would be hurt by headlines and by people who want to win prizes for finding things. I told myself we were safer. It was a story I told because I liked how I looked in it. He looked up finally and let the embarrassment be visible. "I drove him to your porch." He wrote the language. I only learned it. Donovan, old enough to have favorites and young enough to pretend he did not, said, "Write that down, exactly like that." The community did what communities do when mystery becomes man. It rewrote its gossip at speed. Kids who had whispered ghost whispered neighbor instead. A woman at the market asked Karen if she would mend a hem and then cried when the answer was yes. Kevin's supervisor approved a week of personal days no one could afford and told him to take 2. He did. He sat on the Miller steps at dusk and said almost nothing, and left when it was time. It was a craft now, and he was good at it. Inside the house, photos shifted places. Amanda replaced the old Take One Bowl note with a print of the reunited photo corners. On the hallway wall, she hung the tracing paper pegboard overlay next to the bracelet in a shadow box. She labeled nothing. Let the objects speak their language. English could wait for the documentary some other year. There were confrontations, too, because reality asks for them. A cousin, long silent, texted Karen a brittle sentence about safety and forgiveness that sounded like a talk radio caller. Karen replied with a photo of the double stitch on the bag and no words. The cousin sent a heart emoji and then nothing for a week. That was fine. Not all doors open for the same people. On Friday, Amanda and Nathan walked to the Maple. The chalk was gone. Rain had written its own erasure. Nathan took a piece of white chalk from his pocket and drew a square on the sidewalk, neat, edges crisp. He wrote "Now" inside it. Then, below, smaller, KM. Amanda touched his wrist. "You know that means a lot of things to us," she said. He nodded. "Keep Mom, Karen Miller, Kid's Map." He added a small mountain shape and said carefully, "Mountains, too." He grinned, proud of the polysemy. Amanda laughed. "You were always an English teacher's brother." They went home to make grilled cheese because grilled cheese is civilization. Karen buttered evenly. Nathan flipped at exactly the right sizzle, Thomas sliced the sandwiches on the diagonal, then paused, remembering triangles. Nathan watched his eyes and said, "Triangle's okay." Thomas laughed and cut. The air smelled like browned bread and relief. After dinner, Donovan came by with a folder he refused to place on the table until everyone had a hand on something warm. "I'm retiring again," he said. "For real this time." He looked at Nathan. "I kept a photo of my daughter in my wallet for years after she moved out because I didn't know what to do with my hands. I think," he added, slightly embarrassed by the confession, "that I do now." He handed Nathan the folder. Inside, a copy of the case diary entry from 2009, in which Donovan had written 4 rules. 2 blasts. Wait. Stay by the maple. Don't talk to strangers. He had underlined wait twice. "I didn't know I was writing a language for a future version of you," he said. "But I was." Nathan touched the underlines with the tip of one finger, like reading Braille. Later, when the house had exhaled, the radio hiccuped at 8:26, by habit more than miracle, and Minerva barked once, proof that dogs respect rituals they didn't invent. Amanda went to the garage to put the spiral back in its drawer and found Nathan standing at the bench, pencil poised over paper. He was drawing the orange bag carefully with the marker face just crooked enough, the double-stitch X-ed in the corner. At the top of the page he wrote, "Why the bag was full." He paused, looked at her, and nodded permission. She read aloud, slow, to make sure the words had somewhere soft to land. "I filled it because we didn't get to finish Halloween. I thought if I brought it back full, we could finish the night. Then I learned finishing is not the same as going back. Finishing means going forward together." Amanda swallowed. The room swam and then steadied. "That's the ending," she said, then corrected herself, because endings are rooms. "That's an ending." He smiled small. "Almost," he said, but now it was a joke between co-authors. The next day held paperwork and doctors and the boring sacred. A physician examined the old ulna and noted clean healing, gave a tetanus shot because people forget those when mystery takes over a family calendar, and asked gentle questions about sleep. Nathan answered with honesty and a finger on the bracelet when his chest tightened. The doctor nodded like a metronome and wrote OT, referral, and speech consult not as corrections, but as invitations. They went to the storage unit one more time with Marta. Nathan stood in the doorway, looked at the red toolbox, opened it, and took out the tape and the photo strip and placed them in a plastic bin labeled Home. He left the cedar bundles where they were and smiled at the smell. "For beds," he said. "Garden." Karen touched his sleeve. "We'll build one," she said, practical hope sparkling like daylight in dust. On Sunday, Amanda drove east, alone, to the gas station where the story had first clicked back into the present. The manager with silver hair wiped a counter and raised her eyebrows, a question without impatience. Amanda placed 2 things on the counter, a thank you note and a wrapper folded into a square. "He's home," she said. The woman's smile looked like a porch light that had fixed itself. "Good," she said. "I like it when stories decide to behave." Sunday night they set 3 bowls, one for popcorn, one for candy that had somehow never lost its hold on them, and one for Minerva. They watched a movie with subtitles because words help, even when you can hear. Nathan sat at the second stair, and then the first, and then the rug, and later, when the credits rolled and the house creaked the way houses always do, he stood up, walked to the table, lifted the orange bag, and handed it to Karen. "You keep it," he said. "I'll bring the candy." Karen laughed and covered her mouth because joy can make its own weather. "Deal," she said. She turned off the porch light. It did not flicker. Amanda took the spiral and wrote one sentence in the clean margin. "He is not vanished. He is here." Then, in smaller letters, "We did it slow. It stayed." Before bed, Nathan stepped onto the porch alone. The night had the soft iron smell the Front Range wears before snow. He lifted the whistle and blew one short note, then two, then waited. Across the neighborhood a dog barked. A radio somewhere muttered copy. In the street, a bike rolled past. Kevin, the headlamp's beam, steady as a promise. Nathan put the whistle in his pocket and went back inside, not because the outside was unsafe, but because the inside was ready. In the dark living room, Minerva lifted her head and thumped her tail once. Nathan sat on the rug and leaned his back against the couch, eyes open, a man learning the geography of rest. Amanda stood in the hall and did the maddest brave thing a chronicler can do. She closed the spiral and left the pen on the table. From the garage, the radio gave a small, unnecessary, perfect peep at 8:26. Thomas didn't even look up. "Copy," he said, smiling at no one and everyone. Surprise emotional reveal. Amanda found, tucked inside the orange bag's lining, a tiny paper map Nathan had drawn with a golf pencil, likely years ago. Rectangle, C17, to circle, maple, to square, home, with a mountain M between. The paper was worn to suede. It had ridden with them all week without being seen. She decided not to show it that night. Some talismans work better when they are unannounced, doing their quiet job under the skin of a thing. They went to sleep, and sleep held. Snow finally came to Boulder that November, quieting the streets under a powder that erased chalk and softened porch steps. The Miller house, for the first time in 13 years, carried a sound more natural than static, the laughter of people who had run out of reasons to whisper. Nathan sat by the window, tracing the fog of his breath with one finger, while Karen hemmed a curtain not because it needed repair, but because she wanted to sew without trembling. Amanda wrote a single line in the spiral each night, short, unforced, less record than release. Thomas tuned the radio at 8:26 out of habit, but now he did it with a smile, listening for the hiss like a lullaby rather than a summons. The orange bag hung by the door on a nail, not hidden, not glorified. It had become what it always should have been, luggage for ordinary days, not evidence. Karen sometimes tucked grocery coupons into it, a small rebellion against history. Nathan himself had written on its inside seam in careful block letters, "Full is not finished." Amanda saw it once when she was reaching for her keys. She chose not to comment, letting the bag carry its own wisdom. The community adjusted with the uneven rhythm small towns know well. Some avoided eye contact in the grocery store, as though the family's return had exposed too much about their own years of silence. Others leaned in too far, eager to trade casserole dishes for stories they hadn't earned. Kevin came often, but he didn't overstay. His apology had become action. Holding a flashlight steady while Thomas worked, driving Nathan to therapy appointments, sitting on the porch without forcing words. Sometimes, at dusk, Nathan tapped two fingers against his knee in Kevin's direction. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was language. Amanda filed her last police report copy in a new binder labeled, not with Nathan's name, but with a date, Halloween 2022. She wrote one line on the inside cover. This is when it stopped being a case and started being a life again. She left the old binders untouched, stacked like sediment. They were history, and history didn't need editing. What mattered was the open binder on the kitchen shelf, holding grocery lists, therapy notes, and a page where Nathan had drawn a map of their block, complete with chalk marks on the maple and a dog doodle labeled Minerva's Kingdom. At night, Nathan sometimes pulled the whistle from his pocket and blew one short note, then two. It wasn't a call anymore. It was punctuation, a way of saying, here, still here. Thanksgiving that year looked different in the Miller household. The table, once a place of empty chairs and forced small talk, was crowded again. Karen laid out her mother's old china, not for guests, but for her son, because rituals deserved proper staging. Nathan ate slowly, pausing often to touch the rim of the plate, as if memorizing its weight. Amanda noticed he lined up the fork exactly parallel to the knife, then left it crooked at the end of the meal. Progress written in silverware. After dessert, Thomas pulled out the radio, not to chase static, but to let Nathan press the dial himself. The young man turned the knob until a faint country station came through. The music was nothing special, but Karen hummed along and Nathan smiled. "Music," he said, the words soft but intact. Thomas closed his eyes, and for the first time in over a decade, he let himself cry where his son could see him. Outside, the maple tree stood bare, its branches black against the sky. For years, that tree had been a marker of absence. Now it was simply a tree again, though Amanda suspected she would always glance at its roots when she passed. She understood now that memory doesn't vanish when a mystery resolves. It changes shape. Some pieces stay jagged, others smooth over time. But all of them remain part of the ground you walk on. The neighborhood began to fold Nathan back into its rhythms. A boy down the street invited him to shoot hoops. Nathan only bounced the ball a few times, laughing when it skittered away, but he stayed on the court. At church, Karen introduced him without ceremony. "This is my son, Nathan." Some people gasped, some cried, some only nodded, but nobody asked for proof. Proof had already been lived. Amanda, who had defined herself for so long as the archivist of a disappearance, began to imagine a different role. She started a draft of a book, not about the crime, not even about the years of searching, but about endurance, about what it means to keep light in a house when you don't know if anyone will ever walk through the door again. She wrote the first line one morning at the kitchen table. "This is not a story about what was taken. It's a story about what stayed." The bag, the whistle, the cedar scent, all of them would remain in the family's orbit. They had become symbols, yes, but more importantly, they had become ordinary again. The whistle hung on a hook by the door beside a set of keys. The orange bag held library books on weekdays and groceries on weekends. The cedar blocks went into drawers, making the clothes smell faintly of the forest. Objects once frozen in time had been thawed into use. On the first anniversary of Nathan's return, Amanda stood with him under the maple. The street was lined with pumpkins again, the air full of the same crisp bite it had carried all those years ago. She asked him if he wanted to mark the moment. He shook his head, then bent down, picked up a piece of chalk, and wrote one word on the sidewalk. "Here." He underlined it once, then handed the chalk to Amanda. She underlined it again. That night the house glowed with the ordinary sounds of life. Forks clinking, a dog sighing, a radio muttering. Karen turned off the porch light before bed, her hand steady on the switch. Amanda closed the spiral and placed it in the drawer, not to be opened again. Thomas whispered into the dark, "Not a prayer this time, just a sentence. We made it." And Nathan, lying in his own bed for the first time in 15 years, pressed the whistle to his lips and let out one note. Short, steady, final. It carried through the house like an exhale.